Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So we continue with the first poem from the Diwan of Al-Mutanabbi, which begins with the verse Al-Qalbu a'lamu ya adulu bida'ihi wa ahaqqu minka bijafnihi wa bima'ihi. And so we've arrived at the verse where the poet states وَالْعِشْقُ كَالْمَعْشُوقِ يَعْذُبُ قُرْبُهُ لِلْمُبْتَلَى وَيَنَالُ مِنْ حَوْبَائِهِ. And so this verse is a continuation of the poet no longer addressing the reproaches directly and using these jumal al-ismiya, these sentences that begin with a noun, in order to indicate that what he's referring to is emphatic and is not subject to change at all. And so we see this in the previous verse where he states إن القتيل مدرجا بدموعه مثل القتيل مدرجا بدمائه. So he let us know that the killings that occur through the draining of blood is similar to one whose blood is drained through tears. So this is emphatic. This is not subject to change. And so he says here والعشق كالمعشوق يعذب قربه للمبتلى وينال من حوبائه. And so looking at the vocabulary, what we see here first is qurb. And qurb is closeness or nearness. And some possible synonyms include dunub. And dunub, it implies closeness, but there's a focus on movement towards a particular thing. Also, muhadha, it implies closeness, but it also implies side by side or adjacency. And it doesn't carry an emotional connotation such as qurb. So the next word that we find is adhb, or in this case here, ya'dhubu. And the word ya'dhubu is in relation to food or drink. It refers to anything that is palatable and pleasant to taste. So the verb adhaba implies a man or an animal, or particularly a donkey or a horse, refraining from eating due to extreme thirst. So adhuba is anything that is palatable. So adhuba, which is what the poet refers to here in this bait, where he says وَالْعِشْقُ كَالْمَعْشُوقِ يَعْذُبُ قُرْبُهُ. So it's referring to a pleasant state, so an enjoyment that one receives. And this is in opposition to the word adhaba, which implies that a man, a donkey, or horse refrains from eating due to extreme thirst, or refrains from sleep. And so this is the root for the word adhab, the torment that we see very prevalently in the Quran. So possible synonyms include yabtali, which is to be afflicted, and particularly with a trial, or yusab, which is to be struck by a hardship or a calamity. So the next word is hawba, which is the soul that experiences intensity or extremity of emotional or existential suffering. And the possible synonyms include ana, which is a laborious or exhausting aspect of distress, or shidda, which is hardship or severity in general. So So the poet says, وَالْعِشْقُ كَالْمَعْشُوقِ يَعْذُبُ قُرْبُهُ, that love is as sweet and cherished as the proximity of the beloved. لِلْمُبْتَلَى وَيَنَالُ مِنْ حَوْبَائِهِ, even though it takes a toll on the lover's soul. المبتلى, the one who's being tested. وَيَنَالُ مِنْ حَوْبَائِهِ, even though it takes a toll on his or her soul. So with regards to its i'rab, we have والعشق, الواو حرف العطف. العشق المبتدأ مرفوع. كالمعشوق، الكاف حرف جر. المعشوق اسم مجرور. وكالمعشوق is شبه جملة في محل رفع خبر المبتدأ. يعذب فعل مضارع مرفوع. قربه فاعل مرفوع للفعل يعذب. والهاء ضمير متصل. للمبتلى لام حرف جر. المبتلى اسم مجرور. الواو حرف عطف. ينال فعل مضارع مرفوع. من حرف جر. حوبائه اسم مجرور. والهاء ضمير متصل. So this verse means that the love of the lover finds closeness to the beloved sweet and enchanting, even though it harms the lover's very soul, which can lead to its destruction. So as you can see here, I've colored the harf al-ataf waw, and that's an indication that it is hal. So it's يعذب قربه للمبتلى حال كونه كذا. So يعذب قربه, that the love is as sweet and cherished as the proximity of the beloved, while at the same time it is taking its toll on the lover's soul. You will also notice that the word yanalu is also highlighted in green, and it is a fi'l mudari', and it indicates al-istimrar, a continuation, والتجدد, the newness of this particular thing. So he's saying that the يعذب قربه وينال من حوبائه. يعذب قربه, that he finds sweetness in the proximity of the beloved, and this is constant, and it's also renewed. So the sweetness, as in addition to it taking a toll on his soul, they both happen together. They both are continuous actions that are renewed in terms of the outcomes of these two actions, one being sweet, يعذب, and the second being ينال. وينال من حوبائه. As you can see, also the harf jar min is also highlighted. And so the word min, so he could have said ينال حوباءه. So the addition of the min here lets us know that there is a sense of proximity, sense of closeness, as if the afflicted person is actively engaging with or extracting their share of suffering from the broader concept of the lover's trials. And another possible understanding is that the min can also imply that a small portion. So even a small portion of the suffering is significant enough to overwhelm the lover's soul. So moving on to the next verse, where the poet says, لو قلت للدنف الحزين فديته مما به لأغرته بفدائه. And so in this verse here, he's speaking hypothetically. He's speaking hypothetically where he says لو قلت. لو يفيد امتناع الامتناع. So when one uses the word low, is as if you're saying if, and if in the sense that this action did not happen. So the word that we find that stands out in this particular verse is the word denif. And denif is the one suffering from illness or deep pain. And the possible synonym includes marid, which is a general meaning of sickness, or saqim, which is a chronic illness that is unlikely to be cured, or it has persisted with the individual and caused significant fatigue and discomfort. So in this particular verse, the poet says, لو قلت للدنف الحزين فديته. So if you were to say to the love-stricken person, if you were to say to him or her, I wish the torment of love you feel were mine. So I wish you were not suffering. I wish that suffering that you're experiencing were mine. الدنف الحزين فديته مما به لأغرته بفدائه. If you would say this to him, he would be overcome with jealousy. His jealousy would come from his possessiveness over his beloved and his fear that someone might take his place in their hearts. So in terms of the i'rab, لو لو's حرف شرط يفيد الامتناع الامتناع. قلت is فعل ماضي. التاء ضمير متصل في محل رفع فاعل. للدنف لام حرف جر. دنف اسم مجرور باللام. الحزين صفة. فديته فدى فعل مضارع مبني على السكون. التاء ضمير متصل في محل رفع فاعل. الهاء ضمير متصل في محل نصب مفعول به. مما من حرف الجر. ما اسم موصول. به باء حرف الجر. الهاء ضمير متصل في محل جر. لأغرته لام التوكيد. أغرت فعل ماضي. التاء ضمير متصل في محل رفع فاعل. والهاء ضمير متصل في محل نصب مفعول به. بفدائه باء حرف الجر. فداء اسم مجرور بالباء. والهاء ضمير متصل في محل جر مضاف إليه. So the word بفدائه, it means بفدائك إياه. And so the masdar is مضيف إلى المفعول. And this particular construction we can see in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says بسؤال نعجتك إلى نعاجي, meaning بسؤاله نعجتك أو نعجتك. So moving to the next verse where the poet says بقي الأمير هوى العيون فإنه ما لا يزول ببأسه وسخائه is now a very common thing that happens in poetry, particularly with poems that were uh, composed by individuals who are living in either courts of a prince, or they're expressing their reverence for an individual, where they, after they've discussed the topic and expressed themselves in a wide variety of verses, they come to a junction where the individual that they have reverence for is actually mentioned in the poem. Either he's mentioned by name, or it is understood in the poem who the poet is referring to. So in this case here, he's saying, وقي الأمير هوى العيون فإنه ما لا يزول ببأسه وسخائه. And so because the adverse effects of love were mentioned throughout the poem, the poet, uh, in this particular verse here, prays for the emir. So he's saying, وقي الأمير هوى العيون فإنه ما لا يزول ببأسه وسخائه. So وقية, it comes from the verb, from the مصدر الوقاية, so protection. So وقية is the مبني المجهول form, to be protected or shield from harm, and is often associated with prevention. So الوقاية is a prevention. So طب الوقاية is preventative medicine. And its possible synonyms include حمية. So continuing with the مبني المجهول, حمية, which focuses on the active defense or warding off any kind of harm. Another possible synonym includes أصينة, which implies maintaining or keeping something intact. Another word that stands out is ba's. So ba's is defined as strength, might, the severity, and this is particularly in the act of war or some type of punishment. And its possible synonyms include quwwa, which is power or strength in general, or shidda, which includes hardship or severity. And finally, we have the word sakha, which is generosity and the ease of spending in response to a request. And this is the possible synonyms include karam, which is giving something willingly to the extent that no one else needs to ask, or al-jud, which is the abundance and the spontaneity in giving without a request. So you see the difference between the three is that the first, sakha, is generosity and the ease of spending, and this is in response to a particular request, while the other two, al-karam and al-jud, are not necessarily used when someone makes a request. And this is why these two words, al-karam and al-jud, the derivatives of these words are, in fact, some of the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he says, Allah Kareem and Kareem, and the one who gives willingly to the extent that no one else needs to ask or needs to be asked. So the karam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is extensive, and it is provided to the extent that no one else needs to ask anyone except other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And al-Jud, al-Jawad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Jawad, and he gives abundantly and spontaneously, not spontaneously in the sense that there is no hikmah involved, but this is done without necessarily after the request of his creation. And so the first thing that we notice is that the word that's being used is wuqiya, and this is used in this past tense, even though we know that the poet is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide the Amir with protection. And this is as opposed to using the present tense. So we see this where we say غفر الله له ما تقدم من ذنبي وما تأخر أو يغفر لمن يشاء. And so, or we say يغفر الله له. And so these are both two phrases that are used to ask for forgiveness. One is more emphatic, which is the past tense. It's as if we're asking for an emphatic uh, uh, forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right now, while yaghfiru can be it can be understood as being in the either the present tense right now or sometime in the future. And so this case here, this is an emphatic form of request where he says wuqiya al-amiru hawa al-uyuni. So the poet is asking for divine protection for the Amir from the affliction of hawa al-uyun. So he's talking about the passionate love which is initiated by the eye. So one sees that which he loves, and then he falls into this affliction. So he says, فَإِنَّهُ مَا لَا يَزُولُ بِبَأْسِهِ وَسَخَائِهِ. And so this affliction of the eye cannot be warded off with the strength or the magnanimity of the Amir. So the Amir is known for his ba's, his strength, his might, his severity, and particularly in war and punishment. This will not help him. This will not protect him against the hawa al-uyun. And similarly, the sakha, so the generosity that the Amir is known for, will also not prevent him from falling victim to the hawa al-uyun. So all of the noble qualities of the Amir cannot shield him from the hawa al-uyun. So with regards to the i'rab, the verb, as we stated, wuqiya, is فعل مضارع مبني للمجهول. الأمير is نائب الفاعل. هوى is مفعول به. العيون مضاف إليه مجرور. والفاء حرف الاستئناف. إن حرف التوكيد. الهاء ضمير متصل في محل نصب اسم إن. ما لا يزول، ما اسم الموصول، لا حرف النفي، يزول فعل مضارع مرفوع. ببأسه باء حرف الجر، بأس اسم مجرور بالباء. والهاء ضمير متصل في محل جر بالإضافة. واو حرف عطف، سخائه، سخاء معطوف على بأس مجرور. والهاء ضمير متصل في محل جر بالإضافة. So we'll stop here today and we'll pick it up next class with the verse beginning with يستأثر البطل الكمي بنظرة ويحول بين فؤاده وعزائه.